At 61, Rick Thomas walked away from the company he built with no plan. A friend told him, "You have the biggest parachute of all." This conversation goes somewhere I didn't expect, and it will stay with you. Welcome to the Operator's Code. Rick, welcome to the podcast. I happened to read a post you just recently posted on LinkedIn. And the way you set it up, the way you discussed it, everything about it led me to believe that there's more going on with that post than just a Happy New Year's greeting to your followers. Explain to me what was going on with you on that particular post.
Well, what you saw was me walking out on Atlantic City Beach Wednesday morning, unexpected with that sunrise. Normally Northeast United States in wintertime is dreary and overcast, and actually the day before it was exactly that. And Wednesday morning, I woke up and saw the sun coming up over the ocean, and I thought, "Oh my goodness, let's take advantage of this and you know experience this beautiful sunrise. It doesn't happen like this every day." And uh, actually, I really believe that when we are living with some level of gratitude and can appreciate what we see, we can share that, communicate that, because it goes beyond just the moment. And that's what I think I was trying to say there is, here I was in New Jersey, getting ready to go visit a good client, starting out the first week of the year, hitting the ground running, um, and just grateful to be there and appreciative for the opportunities that have been brought to me, and that I have the ability to show up and engage and actually be effective. And that's leadership, and that's also kind of living in the moment in a way.
So what exactly was it that you were doing while you were up there?
I've been hired by a client in the Middle East to oversee the construction of a new 90-foot Viking sport fish yacht. And so my role is to show up to the shipyard once or twice a month and inspect the progress, check off on the technical specifications, verify things are the way we're supposed to be so that payments can be made and the build can be delivered on time and on schedule and on budget. So I'm there with the benefit of having dealt with this shipyard for over 30 years, having personal relationships with the owners of the shipyard. And so everybody's kind of smiling because we know each other, trust each other, and we're kind of creating this process to be as easy as it possibly can be, which is unique in the world of boat building.
That's interesting because I know from watching other podcasts about the build process, it's incredibly technical. I mean,
Hmm.
probably more technical than the buyers themselves could actually functionally go in and do what you do at this point.
Most can't.
So,
No.
so the degree of trust has to be enormous.
Yeah.
So
Eh,
how do you go about building that trust? Because trust is fundamental in any relationship.
Patrick, 40 years of showing up and doing the right thing. Um, and it's interesting because I spent the first 35 of those 40 years running my own business. I started in the back of my dad's shop in Clearwater, Florida in 1986. And after leaving my company, selling it to my partners, um, I wasn't sure what I would do. And it was only after stepping away that I realized that over that period of time, I had built a strong reputation and I had actually earned the trust of my industry. Sometimes when your head's in it, you don't see the big picture as clearly as when you step away. And that's what I did. I stepped away, and then I realized, wow, not only am I enjoying a good reputation because I basically have done the right thing by my clients and my vendors and everybody I interact with over those years. I've gained tremendous amount of knowledge of our industry, insight, wisdom. I mentor people. There's an organization called Young Professionals in Yachting that I'm involved in, that I mentor those young people that are coming up. And all of those elements come together to create that level of trust that is what I think opens doors and allows opportunities to manifest.
So let's wind back. You talked about how you started working in your dad's shop.
Yeah.
How old were you when you started?
25 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're a young man. Is this an industry I'm assuming you knew something about because your dad was in the industry?
Nope. Nope. I came from my background was my education. I went to Florida Institute of Technology, got a degree in underwater technology. I went out to the Gulf states and I was a commercial diver for 4 years, working in the oil fields, running pipelines and all of that. So I come back and I start working for my dad because the last thing I really want to do is work for my dad. But it was an opportunity to kind of fill in the space while I was waiting for another opportunity to show up. And I kind of fell into what was going on, and I saw an opportunity to start making small products for some local yacht builders. And that evolved into a couple of years later, I had a business going. It was what I call accidental success. And I didn't know what I didn't know. And perhaps if I knew back then what I know now, I would have never done it. I'm not that ambitious, and I don't know if my risk tolerance would have been where it needed to be, but I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I just showed up every day. And next thing I knew, we ended up building a company that is still today one of the top three in the world for what we do in manufacturing equipment for yachts, and has an amazing reputation. And it was built organically and not without difficulty, but something I'm very proud of. And it gave me the gravitas I needed to scale myself.
Okay, so you mentioned something very I hear a lot. I didn't want to work for my dad.
Yeah.
So what is it that other than convenience that caused you to say, okay, I'm going to take this moment, I'm going to spend some time with my dad, and then what is it you think happened? Because you say it's by accident, accidental success, but very few things are accidents or just luck. I mean,
Yeah,
accidents, what people call luck, I mean, that's where opportunity meets preparedness, right?
that's true.
So what kinds of things were you doing? I mean,
Well,
just by being on the ground and doing stuff. I mean, it's kind of the old Nike thing, just go do stuff.
just go do
These things
stuff.
happen.
No, it's interesting because when I was in high school and my friends were flipping burgers at Burger King, I was pushing a broom in my dad's shop. He was building residential boat lift equipment in Clearwater for the high end residences where you put your boat behind the dock and pick the boat up out of the water. And I learned how to weld in his shop at 16 years old. I learned how to work some machinery in his shop, and then during the summers, because I didn't want to work for my dad, I ended up working for dock builders, swinging hammers and building docks. So I tell people every dollar I've ever earned is tied back to the ocean in some way, somehow. And I went off to school. I got an education in maritime technologies, underwater technologies. I'm a passionate diver, and I thought, how perfect I can combine my diving passion with work. I did some incredible diving in the Gulf of Mexico, saturation, hard hat diving, that type of thing. And then I came back to Florida theoretically to get married. That fell apart shortly after I got back. And to get a gig doing some inspection diving in Aruba, I couldn't get they weren't issuing work permits for Americans at the time. And so I was working my dad's shop, and I just started seeing some opportunity outside of what he was doing. I started making little aluminum davits for the back of sailboats, and those worked pretty well. And then a couple of boat builders said, "Hey, if you're doing that, can you do this for me?" And it's like, "Yeah, we can do that." And kind of the industry was young enough, and come to find out now, so many years later, there were no businesses focused on doing that discipline. We were unique in coming to the market with a product that was not available off the shelf anywhere else. So we kind of created our own opportunity that way, and that slowly built into, at my peak, I think we had 109 employees and horrible payroll and a lot of obligation, but we had scaled quite a nice business. And I was traveling the world. I was doing business in the Far East, in the Middle East, in Northern Europe, throughout the United States and Canada, New Zealand, Australia. Traveled all those places, got to see the world, got to see how many different ways there are to build a boat, which is remarkable. And, I did it organically and just by using intuition and kind of following where the opportunities led me.
So when did you have your aha moment that, okay, there's an opportunity here? Because you've mentioned something that I think is really relevant when you're thinking about entrepreneurship is this notion of a high tolerance for risk. And you said, well, I really don't have that. But you must have had some degree of it because at some point you had a moment that said, you know what? Despite how much I love diving, there's a real opportunity here. So what was that moment? Do you remember?
There's two. One, I met a naval architect in San Diego he was a great mentor. He encouraged me. He brought me early into an organization called the International Super Yacht Society. I became a board member of that at 32 years old. Um, and I thought, now I'm really having fun and I'm feeling some acceptance. And then I realized that the business was getting beyond my own business acumen. I didn't go to school for business. I went to school for technical trade, essentially. And I was at the Miami Boat Show in 1992, and I ran into one of my biggest competitors, and I found an opportunity. He was trying to line up to buy the business he was working for, and they kind of pulled the rug out from underneath his feet, and he was pretty unhappy. And I remember walking down South Beach with him, and we put a handshake deal together that night on South Beach. And it was about 6 weeks later that he bought my parents out and became my partner in the business. And he brought more of the business acumen to the table and the experience he had as my biggest and only competitor in that space. And so we were able to take that and make 1+1 = 3. And that's when the business really started taking off. It was a hard decision, but it was a great decision at the same time.
Okay. So again, there's this element of trust, this handshake deal. And I like
Mhm.
that because a contract's only as good as the paper it's written on. At the end of the day, if people don't want to honor a contract, they don't honor a contract.
It's
And
true.
so you make decisions, I know I do all the time, based on my sense of trust and mutual respect that I have for the individuals with whom I'm actually conducting business. Let's face it, anytime you get involved in a lawsuit, it's a lose-lose proposition for everyone. So
Isn't it
nobody.
though? Yeah,
So
absolutely.
what can you tell me where this sense of instinct, you called that your instinct
Mhm.
around trust and trusting people, where did that come from? How did that evolve or develop? I mean, have you ever thought back and said, this is how I evolved as a person to come around that this instinct is there's something there that you're trusting. I'm trying to
Yeah.
figure out, let's frame what that is.
Well, I think maybe the best way to describe it is if you are present in your relationship, if you are allowing yourself to be what I call situationally aware, and I really believe that there is human nature, there's a fundamental piece where when we're with another human being, we're able to listen to our intuition about that person. A person will exude honesty and trustworthiness and a sense of stability, I guess, if you're allowing yourself to tune into that. Or a person will I'm sure we've all been around somebody where they seem nice enough, but there's just something about that person that just makes you go, that doesn't, there's something that's bugging me there. You pay attention to that. That's our inner intuition speaking to us. That goes back in evolution. That's how we as creatures learn to survive, in more primitive times to to collaborate with those that are going to protect us and help us move, scale, and to stay away from those who are going to be predatory or parasitic and take away from us. And I can tell you that there's been enough times where I had that niggle of a doubt and I went with it anyway. And I almost always regretted that. And so I tell people all the time, I trust my intuition just completely. I don't know that it's ever truly failed me. And I think that's important. I think that's a skill. It's an ability we have, each of us, I think, with our own insights, if we listen to it and pay attention to it.
It's interesting. You've used another term, actually two, that I find there's a common thread with all the people with whom I've spoken, this notion of being present and this concept of being situationally aware,
Yeah.
which is in a rapidly changing, evolving world or marketplace. That's something that I think is relevant to everybody in every phase of your life if you're going to be in control or as control of as much as you can.
Yeah,
And it's
exactly.
one thing to, be subject to geopolitical changes or technological changes over which you have no control, but the ability to be aware and situationally understand how that might impact what you're doing and the changes that you might need to make.
Mhm.
So, and then the other thing you mentioned is this idea of how you build this sort of instinctive ability to trust,
Yeah.
because that's important when you build the leadership constituent roles. Okay. Um, because you have to build, when you have a company that's got 109 people and you're doing business all over the world, you have to be cognizant of the situational position you're in with every single one of those individual different customers or clients, and making sure that your team has the same understanding. Somehow you're able to convey to them the relative importance of each of these different clients, their role, and the things that need to be done to support those clients or customers. Did you have any specific things that you did with your team? Was there team meetings? I don't know, something that where you pushed down this idea of situational awareness, your understanding of the sort of the bigger picture, so that each one of them at their individual levels were able to support that in
Well,
their role?
yeah, Patrick, let me help you unpack that because you touched on a couple of things I think are important. First of all, I've had this for years as a posted on my monitor as a reminder that, and I believe this truly, that failure is part of the first step or recipe to success. And so as a team leader, as a mentor, as a, as somebody who's trying to get everybody pulling in the same direction, I'm clear about that, you know, don't be afraid to fail because that's part of the process. And if you build that into your leadership style, if you build that into the team you've asked to come together and pull in the same direction you're moving in, that's empowering. That allows people to be willing to make decisions and take some risks and know that if it fails, if it doesn't quite work the way they thought it would, yeah, they're going to learn something from it. And who knows, you may or may not get reprimanded for it, but more likely you're going to just be acknowledged for having made a mistake and, asked to have, had some takeaway from that. It's when I think individuals, members of a team, feel that they're not being heard, or that if they make a mistake, that they all is at risk. And that's when I think things fall apart for organizations, corporations, whatever you're talking about or looking at, because one person can't do it themselves. It's not possible. And if you've created an environment of fear where people are not willing to risk, then you're not going to get rewards. You're just going to get people stepping in line and complying with what they perceive is your direction or your expectation. um, you'll
Or worse
never,
yet, they don't
yeah,
make they don't do anything. They wait to be told.
Yeah, that's the worst. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're not moving. You're not moving at all. You're just static at that point in time. So
Right.
I think that's really important in the approach to team building leadership is to, lead from the front, be clear about what the mission is, what the plan is, what we want to do here. You don't leave it wishy-washy or don't leave it open for interpretation. But then to allow because in my world, I've only ever hired professionals. I don't think I've ever hired a minimum wage person to come into one of my businesses. Everybody I want to come in, should be scaled and capable. And if that's the case, then I hired you to be part of something special and be special.
So you mentioned again this idea of mission orientation.
Yeah.
So, and that's important. I think, I mean, a lot of this was coined from the military leaders that came out of the Prussian military, believe it or not. They called it Auftragtaktik. It meant push down and out, push responsibility down and out.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're familiar with the old, let's call it Napoleonic era, when you literally had to send runners over to go tell that guy to go do this, or
Right.
go
Yeah.
tell that guy to go do this. And their theory was, well, if everybody sort of understands the broader mission, as they're on the ground and they're closest to the front and understanding the dynamics of what's happening on the front, they're more capable and a better place to make a decision around what needs to be done in that particular role at that moment to support the broader mission.
Totally.
And today we call that mission orientation. You kind of understand the broader mission, but that also means the relationship between leadership and the constituency. They're not really followers anymore. They are subordinate leaders.
There
I think
you
that's sort of the
go,
way you have
Patrick.
to
I
think
like
about it.
that falls in line with a concept that I'm a big believer in, which is next man up. That in your matrix of employees or corporate structure, you have, obviously you have leaders and you have people that are coming up. The ones that are coming up need to be teaching and mentoring those beneath them or below them to do their job. And they're so they're next up, their supervisor, their VP or president or whoever is above them should be mentoring them and teaching them to do his or her job, so that you've got the depth of knowledge through the entire organization. And if you lose somebody anywhere in that organization, you've got it backstopped, you got it filled, and you then create opportunity and incentive for people to educate themselves, become more involved, and ideally motivated to stay the course and remain within the organization to, move it to everybody's benefit.
Yeah, I think one of the key things we always have to be aware of as leaders is every situation that comes up presents an opportunity for you to give someone else an opportunity to step into that next level,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
do it in a safe way where they can have somebody that's there guiding, having that conversation with them around, maybe not telling them what to do, but asking them the questions that should be asking. They should be asking,
Right.
because frequently failure isn't about necessarily you come up with bad answers. It's you come up with good answers to the wrong questions a lot of times,
In
right?
other words, don't set them up for failure, but
Exactly.
but set them up for success.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
And
So
tolerate the little failures that happen along the way.
absolutely, you will crush incentive. You will crush risk taking if it only takes one instance where somebody gets punished for making a bad choice.
Yeah.
I mean, there are degrees of scale. I mean, obviously, but for it, if in the event that it's a minor setback, you have to manage those with a degree of understanding. It's not just this situation you're dealing with; it's all the future ones that might come about, and you
Yeah.
want them to happen because
Right.
that's how people learn and grow.
Yeah. Well, and I'll take you back to my first career in commercial diving. Um, that's a discipline where failure oftentimes results in death. And so you are a team. Unlike most diving, the divers are actually at the mercy of the support personnel, the life support technicians, and the tenders that are bringing them the gases they have to breathe and the tools they've got to work with in the environment they have to live in. So much is out of the control of the actual diver, and so there is a very strong team building organizational matrix that exists. And it's not surprising that so many of these professionals come from the military, come from that space where that life and death exists. And I will tell you, since I left that profession in 1984, I've used that same mindset throughout the rest of my career, even though I honestly, there's very little life and death that happens in the wonderful world of yachting. It does happen. So, people go to sea. There can be dire consequences for bad actions or mistakes made on the ocean. But by and large, most people showing up for work every day don't risk their life. But it is still the same kind of matrix of support and intelligent management, I think, that keeps everything moving well.
Okay, so we've covered sort of the evolution of yourself from university through your first. I got to mark some time with my dad's shop to well, there's an opportunity here
Yeah.
to scaling your business. What was it that caused you to decide that you were going to now sell? What were you looking for?
You know, Patrick, that's a really good question. I think the honest answer is I went for 4 or 5 years towards the end feeling like I was on the hamster wheel. I was showing up, doing the same thing every day, with the same kind of results. I was compensated well, so there wasn't a lot of financial motivation for me to exit. But professionally and personally, I stopped feeling fulfilled. There was an emptiness. There was something about, just wasn't as fun. It wasn't as interesting as it once was. And I just had an aha moment one day where it's like, Rick, you need to get off the hamster wheel. Um, I didn't know what I would do. This is the scary part, and this is what I like to talk about when I'm mentoring people, is that risk brings rewards if you've got tolerance for risk. So I left my company, offered my resignation, and left the company just a couple weeks before the Palm Beach International Boat Show 4 years ago. And I remember walking the docks and talking to peers of mine in the industry. And I walked up to this naval architect that I've been friends with for a long time. And I said, Ward, I jumped, but I jumped without a parachute. And he said, Rick, what are you talking about, brother? You have the biggest parachute of all. You've got a whole industry that respects and loves you, and you can do anything. I had never heard those words before. I had never stopped long enough to think about reputation and ability and what I had developed and learned and experienced over the last 35 years. And sure enough, Patrick, my phone started ringing. I started getting opportunities that I had never imagined before. And I got involved in some amazing projects. I got involved in a couple other businesses. I started my own LLC that I still run everything through to this day. I'm flying to Amsterdam on Sunday to explore another opportunity, which could be amazing. Um, and all of this has come in the last 4 years because I made that decision to pivot. That, if you've ever read the book, Who Moved My Cheese, that's a great book. And it takes about an hour to read it. It gets you rethinking things. And so it's that reinvention, that ability to overcome the fear of change, to be able to say, I'm going to do something different, and then do it and know that you'll be okay.
And you did that at a stage of your life where most people put it on autopilot and let it glide to a landing, right?
It's funny you say that, Patrick. I was in a conversation just earlier actually, when I was up at Viking, and I was talking to my peer, my compatriot up there, and I was telling him about this trip to Amsterdam, and he knew what I was doing with his company, and I told him about some of the other things I have got going on, and he looks at me and says, "Rick, how old are you?" And I said, "Well, I just turned 65." And he looked at me like, "WTF? I mean, really?" And it's like, yeah, I love this. I'm looking at this next gig is to take me the next decade, and probably be my sunset gig, but it's probably potentially going to be the most lucrative one of my entire career. And as long as I'm having fun, as long as I take satisfaction in the work I'm doing and feel that I'm relevant, and it can be engaged, what would I rather do?
Well, one of the I want to tap into that a little bit because one of the things that I hear a lot about is this notion of happiness and what that is and what that
Mm,
looks like. And it's happiness is not a destination. Happiness is a frame of reference. It's a choice around how you look at the way what things are happening, what's happening in your life,
mhm.
and that own sort of internal drive that says,
Yeah,
I need to go do something different or I need to do something.
yeah.
And it doesn't matter your age. I mean, it really doesn't. I mean,
No,
inside, you may be 65, but inside, you're still that young man that wants to get
no,
out
no,
there and do things.
no question about it. Patrick, you mentioned happiness, and I think sometimes that's confused with satisfaction. Um, Happiness is a state of mind for sure, and it comes and goes, depends on circumstances. Um, I mentioned earlier in this conversation that I've had a lot of adversity in my world. When you get to 65, that you have that opportunity, I guess. But one
If you
of the things,
if you haven't been doing anything.
yeah, exactly true. Um, but one of the things that I tell people, because when in public, when I'm amongst my peers, when I'm out and about, I keep a smile on my face. I do. I just it comes naturally to me, and I start every morning waking up grateful. And I'm grateful that I've got everything I've got in my life. I'm grateful that I've got my health. I'm grateful I can get out of bed and engage in the day. And you make a decision. I tell people all the time, you've got two choices every morning when you wake up. You can wake up and choose to be happy, or you can wake up and choose to be miserable. They're both choices. And, you know, trust me, I've had plenty of reason to wake up and be miserable and have chosen happiness over that, just because I think more comes to you, your stress levels are reduced, your ability to work through things is enhanced when you go into the day with a positive mindset. And
So so
yeah.
would you also say that mindset if you walk into your office and you're grumpy or you walk into your office and you're full of joy, how does that impact your organization?
Oh, it's huge because you resonate. What you give is what you get. So if you go in and you're that frumpy, grumpy boss or mentor or whatever your role happens to be, you're gonna you're going to bring the room down to your level, or you're going to bring it up to your level. And that's where I talk about, those that know me and will know, I talk about high energy, resonance, how we as people have that in us. And if we channel into that energy, if we allow ourselves to open our eyes and, like we are, make eye contact with each other and engage, be present, and you be present with high levels of energy and essentially positivity, um, you automatically bring other, even those that come to the table with low energy, they'll come up somewhat. Um, and I associate with high energy people. I pay
So
attention to that.
so this is almost what you're talking about now, I would view as a special case of situational awareness
Yeah, yeah.
called self-awareness,
Oh, important.
you know?
Totally.
And I think that's really relevant. especially today. I want to shift this conversation. We've talked about what you're doing today and kind of how you evolved, and I'm interested in gaining some of your perspective around how things have changed in the world we live in today. We grew up in one world where it seemed like the world was our oyster. There was nothing but opportunity. Reagan was president. You
Mhm.
know, in the early 90s, the communist red wall fell. You know, the world was integrating. We were all going to be partners and friends. And now we live in a world where we're all suspicious of each other. We're generationally suspicious of each other. You know, globalization is coming to a grinding halt. What are
Yeah.
some of what I would call, in your mind anyway, these eternal lessons that you could share with people, that it doesn't matter that the situation's different today. There are some things that just don't change.
Yeah. Wow. Let me give that a moment here because you're right. There are some things that just don't change, and then there are things that are fundamentally different. Um, I've raised three boys, and my youngest is a junior in high school and is getting ready to go out in the world. And I've just spent the last year homeschooling him, and he's traveled the world with me, so he got to see the world through my eyes.
That's awesome. I mean,
It is
that's
awesome.
what a great experience for you.
Oh, amazing. That came on the heels of losing my middle son to suicide a year and a half ago. And
Wow.
that was devastating. Um, and I only bring this up in the context of these are two young men that I've raised that have experienced the world differently. One sees it as an oyster of opportunity, excited about it. The other decided that this wasn't a world for him and checked out. And, so when I look at young people and I mentor young people, I pay attention to how they perceive things. And unfortunately, we've become, I think, as a society, too divided, black and white, red and blue, good or bad. There's nobody's willing to come to the middle as I believe we used to be able to do. And I think that's fundamentally a problem that we've got to figure out because at the end of the day, we're all in this big blue ball in the sky together. We've got to find out how we can create economic prosperity and opportunity. Young people, unfortunately, and we talk about situational awareness, they are too disconnected because of social media and these electronic devices they walk around with in their hands all day long. And I think that is part of the sickness or the illness that we have as a society we've got to figure out because it's that is creating so much disconnect and it's just profound. You and I didn't have that growing up. We weren't distracted by these devices and all the messaging that comes across these devices. And there's I'm sounding a little old fashioned, but I think you and I grew up at the perfect time because we had to engage with other people to have these experiences. We had to actually be in person and really living life engaged. And so many young people today will never do that. They will sit in front of these screens. They'll sit and work virtually. I mean, look at the statistics. Young men are not becoming fathers like they used to be. The birth rate's dropping. There's you look at dating and first experiences, and all of that is so far off the chart compared to where it was. That's something that I think, as leaders, mentors, as people that have that insight that we still have because we're still here, we could and should try to communicate and find ways of getting people, young people particularly, to disconnect for a little while and to reconnect to the real world.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's a it's not just black and white. It's almost like sometimes men and women are at war with each other. I mean, it's just
Mhm.
unbelievable to me. I can't. It's difficult for me to get my mind wrapped around how we got where we are right now. And I agree with you that this social media experiment, because that's literally what it is right now. We don't really understand the
Mm-mm.
longitudinal effect that this is gonna have on our society. I think we're only beginning to see some of the really negative things, 10, 15 years into the experiment, and it's like, uh-oh,
Yeah.
how do you reverse that at this point? But
Can you?
um, I think that the main thing that I think is that we've got to somehow get people focused back internally. It's almost as though social media has magnified this focus on externalities as to who you are and who you are becoming. Um, you know, Obviously, anything you see on social media, that's their highlight reel. That's
Yeah.
not their everyday life. It's
No.
not like what they're doing every day.
And that's
Um,
damaging, Patrick. People look at that and they think, oh, boy, my life sucks because look at these people. They live this amazing life and I'm not there. I can't get there. And they give up. They become depressed because of the propaganda that's put in front of them hour after hour after hour. And you can't compete with that.
well, again, we've got to find a way to help frame what those experiences really are. And I'm not exactly sure how we would go about doing that. I mean, I do know this: it has to start at the grassroots level. It has to
Yes.
start with number one, people recognizing their own agency and their willingness to be response able, and just recognizing I
I
have the
like that
capacity
response able. Yeah.
to respond. Okay, that's number one.
Yeah.
And then number two, a willingness to pay the price, to be account able. I am account able. I am able to pay the price,
Hmm.
and I'm willing to pay the price.
Thank you.
And then
Yes.
only when you have those two things first do you really have the ability to achieve individual liberty. Because if you don't accept those two things, you are always going to be a secondary character in somebody else's story.
And that's no way to be.
Yeah,
Life
nobody
is
wants to live that life.
no. Life has too many opportunities. This wonderful world we're in can bring so much if you just allow it, or are open to it, are situationally aware, and are able to disconnect. That goes back to why I took my son out of what I call the governmental institution of lower learning and
I,
put him on the
I
road
like
with me
that.
for a
I
year
like that.
to get out and see the world. I took him to Europe 3 times and throughout the United States, and we took a trip across the country from Fort Lauderdale all the way to California. In part of this, and even now that he's back in school, one of the ways that we counterbalance this media onslaught is he's developed a passion for skateboarding. I've given him the green light to fully engage in that lifestyle and all that goes along with that. He's also a very avid scuba diver, and we take our boat out. And so I tell people, it's if you can find ways to get out of the house, out of the office, out into the world, whether it's on bikes or skates or boats or airplanes or whatever it is, um, there is if and then you particularly if you can then create a passion around that, that's going to counterbalance that desire to pick up that device and doom scroll, and put
Right.
yourself in that headspace, which I find is not good.
Okay. Well, I am sorry for your loss.
You,
I can't even imagine. I don't even have a frame of reference to try and empathize with you
you're
at that level.
you're
But
you're blessed, and that's what I've learned coming from that is that when that happens, it's unimaginable, and you become part of a club you never wanted to be part of, and then you you deal with your grief the best way you can. And for me, I talk about it on my own podcast, and I mentor other people that are going through it, and I talk about it, and there's therapy for me in that.
okay. So I guess one of the big takeaways from this is challenges in life are not an exception.
No,
They're a feature.
definitely not.
They're a feature of life. They're going to
Yes,
happen.
they will happen.
And in large and almost completely whether or not you perceive this as something that's joyful or something that's depressing is really more about the way you frame the
Hmm.
situation that you're in. And that's
Yeah.
a mental framework. It's
Isn't
not
it
a,
though?
yes, it is. It's absolutely true. And I think the biggest challenge that we're going to have going forward is how do we reach the young people today to help them have that different
Hmm.
frame of reference, um, to be more, this, I don't want to use this word negatively, but to be more self-centered,
Yeah.
not outwardly centered, so they can be more focused on who and what they are becoming, not trying to compare themselves to anybody else.
I like the way you put it that way, because usually the term self-centered comes with a negative connotation. But in the way you just described it, it's anything but a negative connotation. I think it's something that's important that young people um, can get their head around and focus on themselves. Unfortunately, even speaking for myself, it's taken too many years of my own life to get to the point where I stopped long enough and looked inwardly deep enough to become self-centered and self-aware and understand, what I wish I had understood years previously, right? So it's a process. And
Unteachable lessons, right?
unteachable lessons. It's one of the reasons, though, and I'll encourage people listening to this conversation, if you're in a place where you can step in and mentor. My industry does have a couple organizations that allow me to mentor young people. And through my own podcast, I've had people reach back to me, and I've had the joy of conversations and mentorship. And I try to use my own experiences in adversity to help others understand how to work through adversity. Because honestly, if you can deal with the things that I've had to deal with in my life, you can take on anything. So those are the takeaways that I'm using right now to try to turn the corner a little bit or do my part to give back and help people scale to their best.
Well, God bless you for that. That's, I mean, really, that's the only way I think we can do this at this point. There's got to be enough people that decide at the grassroots level, starting with themselves and then with their family and then
Yeah.
with their local community, that somehow, some way we find the collective energy to push back against some of these institutional things that are suffocating
Hmm.
us as
Yeah.
individuals. I mean, that's
Yeah.
really what's happening. We're suffocating as individuals.
And we don't even know it, or a lot of us don't know it.
It's like cooking a frog. How you cook a
Just
frog? You put it in a pot of tepid water and you heat it up slowly.
yeah, they just never notice it until it's too late. No,
Yeah,
that's
before you're boiled.
before you're boiled. Yeah, no doubt. Um, Good analogy for sure. No, I think it's I think we use this in early in the conversation. So towards the end of this conversation, I'm bringing it up again. It's that situational awareness, the self-awareness, and that's something that is, I don't know if it's taught as much as it's learned. Um, you need to be in enough circumstances where you recognize the value of being situationally aware, self-aware, that then opens up your eyes and mindset to that. And again, as long as people are in this zone, sitting here with devices in their hands, you can't be situationally aware. You can't be self-aware because you're just too self-absorbed in what you're connected to.
Yeah. I have a saying that, you are in charge of you, Inc. You own every thought, every emotion, every word, every deed. It doesn't mean you turn things off. I mean, we're human. We're going to feel things, but that
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
mean we have to act out of anger or act out of hatred.
Hmm.
And it's this capacity that I'll circle this back to you on our ability to sort of extend willingly the hand of mutual respect that despite whatever differences we may have in some sort of philosophical framework that might, whether it's politics or religion, these are just philosophical frameworks. And at the end of
That's
the
true.
day, we have to recognize that There's nothing more real than the person just standing in front of you or right next to you, or the person you're working with, or the client you're working with. And you don't have to agree about everything. It doesn't mean that you can't be agreeable with each other.
That's
right?
so true. That's so true.
So
I use this tool too, and after the loss of my son, this tool became essential almost for me, and that is living in gratitude. To get up every day and pay attention to the little things and the big things, and to be able to say I am grateful for this, because our brains are wired to look for risks and look for threats and then look for the good things. And so if you start feeding your thought processes good things that you're grateful for, something like every morning I try to walk out barefoot in my backyard and watch the sunrise. And every morning when I see the sunrise, like you saw in that video at the beginning of this conversation, I'm sitting in gratitude. I'm standing there saying, thank you. I have another day. I have another sunrise. I'm so grateful to be here, to feel the sand between my toes, cold as it was, and the sun coming up over the horizon. And what a great way to start the day. Just that alone, Patrick.
Yeah. And I can't think of a better way to end this conversation, is that's probably some of the most sage advice. Is you begin the day with an optimistic mental framework every day.
Yep.
And so, Rick, I want to thank you for your time and sharing, obviously, some things which I'm sure were hard to share about the loss of your son, and for sharing your experiences and your wisdom and your learnings. And I'm sure that all the listeners will take something different from it, but will take something of value.
Hope so. I hope so. I mean, there's a lot of experience between the two of us talking, and I think out of this conversation, there's a few takeaways if people are paying attention.
Well, one other thing, I don't want you to forget, I'm still an aspiring yacht owner one day, so I may be reaching out to you if I've got questions. So,
brother, I can set you up. You just tell me the size and the type and budget, and I'll figure out how you get you there.
That's awesome. Well, Rick, thank you very much. Hey, everyone. Thank you for listening to this show. We can't tell you how much we appreciate it. Remember, the best lessons don't survive unless someone chooses to pass them on. The code you operate by today isn't just building the leader you'll be tomorrow. It's shaping the organization, the people, and the legacy that you choose to leave behind. So be intentional about it. This is the Operator's Code. I look forward to seeing you next time.